The first indication that something was fundamentally different about the new student came during orientation week at the Galactic Academy. While representatives from hundreds of civilized worlds mingled in the grand atrium, their conversations flowing in the universal harmony that marked advanced societies, one figure stood apart, not in isolation, but in the way gravity bends space around a massive star. Marcus Chen had arrived 3 days prior aboard a standard transport, carrying nothing but a single duffel bag and credentials that had sent shockwaves through the admissions department. His test scores weren't just exceptional, they were unprecedented. Mathematical reasoning that surpassed Vulcarian computational specialists. Strategic thinking that made Xantoran wargame masters pause in consideration. Physical capabilities that defied explanation for a being from what the Galactic Database had classified as a primitive backwater system. But it was the casual mention of his homeworld during the welcome ceremony that truly marked the beginning of what would later be called the Terra Revelation. Ambassador Kethvar of the Hegemony Council had been making his rounds, welcoming new students with the practiced ease of someone who had overseen thousands of such orientations. The students, young representatives of their respective worlds, stood in neat clusters, the crystalline Zephyrians catching light like living prisms, the towering Gorathans with their sage-like bearing, the swift-moving Nexari whose thoughts seemed to race ahead of their words. "And you, young one," Kethvar said, approaching Marcus with the benevolent smile reserved for promising students from developing worlds, "from which system do you hail?" Marcus straightened, and something in his posture caused several nearby conversations to pause. Not the deferential stiffening of most students when addressed by the ambassador, but the unconscious shift of someone accustomed to being ready for what none could say. "Terra, sir. Sol System, Orion Arm, Milky Way Galaxy." His voice carried no shame, no apology for his world's classification. Instead, there was something that made the ambassador's practiced smile falter slightly. Pride. Unmistakable, unshakable pride. The reaction was immediate. A Zephyrian student actually stepped backward, her crystalline form resonating with what could only be described as shock. One of the Nexari dropped the datapad he was holding. The massive Gorathan delegate turned his attention fully toward Marcus for the first time since orientation began. "Terra?" Kethvar's voice carried a note of disbelief. He activated his personal database with a subtle gesture, and the information that flowed across his neural implant made his skin pale to a shade that approached translucence. "You said Terra? As in Death World Classification 12? "Yes, sir." Marcus's response was simple, direct, and completely devoid of the embarrassment or defensiveness that typically accompanied students from lower classification worlds. If anything, his spine straightened further. The silence that followed was not merely an absence of sound, it was a void into which the comfortable assumptions of hundreds of students and faculty members disappeared. Death World Classification 12 was not just a category, it was a warning. A designation reserved for planets so hostile, so fundamentally antithetical to life, that the mere fact of survival required capabilities that bordered on the mythological. The classification system itself was straightforward enough. Paradise worlds rated a 1, perfect atmospheric composition, stable climate, abundant resources, minimal threats. Garden worlds earned a 2 or 3. Most civilized worlds, the ones that produced the bulk of galactic civilization's citizens, rated between 4 and 7. Hostile worlds, places that had produced some of the galaxy's fiercest warriors and most innovative scientists, might reach 8 or 9. But 12? 12 was theoretical. 12 was the classification given to worlds where life shouldn't exist, where evolution had been forced into corners so extreme that the results defied comprehension. The last documented 12 had been the homeworld of the extinct Reavers, whose civilization had collapsed when their planet finally succeeded in killing them all. "There must be some mistake," Kethvar said, his diplomatic training warring with the evidence before him. "The Sol system is listed as uninhabited. The third planet shows signs of primitive development, but our surveys indicated. When were those surveys conducted?" Marcus asked quietly. The question hung in the air like a blade. Kethvar's expression shifted as he accessed deeper records, his face cycling through confusion, surprise, and something approaching fear. "Approximately 1200 galactic standard years ago," he said slowly. "But that would mean That would mean your information is somewhat out of date, Marcus replied. We've been busy. The word busy seemed inadequate for what the updated scans were showing. Where the Galactic Council records indicated a world barely emerging from its ice age, current readings showed a planet-wide civilization with energy signatures that made several council members' homeworlds look primitive by comparison. Cities that sprawled across continents. Industrial complexes that operated in environments that would kill most galactic species within minutes. Transportation networks that functioned through weather patterns that could strip the atmosphere from lesser worlds. But it was the deeper analysis that truly shocked them. Terra wasn't just inhabited, it was thriving. Despite environmental conditions that included regular seismic activity, extreme weather patterns, aggressive microbial life, predatory megafauna, and atmospheric composition that was barely breathable for most species, humanity had not merely survived, they had conquered their world so thoroughly that they had begun reaching beyond it. Your planet's gravity is listed as 1.4 standard, one of the Nexary students said, his voice barely above a whisper. The atmospheric pressure alone should crush most carbon-based life forms. Marcus glanced around the group that had gathered, noting their expressions with the kind of tactical awareness that most of them would need years to develop. It's home, he said simply. You adapt. The word adapt triggered another cascade of database queries. The results painted a picture that challenged everything the assembled representatives thought they knew about biological possibility. Humans didn't just adapt, they thrived in conditions that would constitute torture for most species. Their baseline physical capabilities exceeded the enhanced maximums of several advanced civilizations. Their psychological resilience profiles suggested a species that had been forged in crucibles that would break the minds of most sentient beings. The fauna listings for your world, the Gorathan delegate rumbled, his deep voice carrying undertones of what might have been respect or fear, include creatures classified as apex predators that exceed the combat ratings of our military-grade security constructs. Oh, you mean the bears? Marcus asked with what appeared to be genuine confusion. Or are you talking about the sharks? The big cats? The venomous snakes? You'll have to be more specific. Terra has a lot of things that like to eat other things. The casual nature of his response sent another ripple through the crowd. Bears? The database showed creatures that were essentially living siege engines, capable of dismantling armored vehicles with their bare appendages. Sharks that could bite through materials rated for spacecraft construction. Venomous reptiles whose toxins could incapacitate beings through armor rated to withstand void exposure. You speak of them as though they're common, one of the Zephyrians managed. They are common, Marcus replied. That's why we learned to avoid them, hunt them, or work around them. Every ecosystem on Terra has something at the top of the food chain, and, until recently, it usually wasn't us. Until recently? Kethvar's voice cracked slightly. Marcus's smile was subtle, but it contained something that made several students unconsciously step backward. We've gotten better at being apex predators ourselves. The implications of that statement settled over the gathering like a heavy shroud. A species that had learned to outcompete creatures that individually exceeded the capabilities of most civilizations' military hardware. A people who spoke of environments that could kill most beings as simply things to work around. The weather patterns alone, a Zentoran wargame specialist said, his tactical mind clearly struggling with the data, show regular storm systems with wind velocities that exceed the maximum recommended speeds for atmospheric flight. How do you maintain civilization through such events? Storm shelters, Marcus said with a shrug. Warning systems. Building codes that account for high winds. You learn to read the sky and plan accordingly. He paused, noting their expressions. Tornadoes are fairly predictable if you know what to look for. Hurricanes give you several days' warning. Earthquakes are trickier, but good engineering helps. Each casual mention of world-ending catastrophes as mere inconveniences deepened the silence. The assembled students were beginning to understand that they weren't simply meeting someone from a hostile world, they were encountering a representative of something fundamentally different. A species that didn't just survive impossibility, they had made it routine. Your oceans, one of the younger students said, clearly reading from a personal database, are listed as containing dissolved compounds that would be classified as industrial toxins on most worlds. Salt water, yeah, Marcus nodded. Plus whatever runoff from the continents. You don't drink it, that'll kill you pretty quickly. But, it's fine for swimming, fishing, transportation. We've got separate sources for drinking water. It says here that contact with your ocean water can cause chemical burns. Marcus looked genuinely confused for a moment. Are you thinking of the deep ocean thermal vents? Those will cook you, sure. Or maybe some of the more polluted areas. We're still cleaning up some of the mess from our industrial revolution. But, regular ocean water? He shook his head. Kids play in it during summer. The idea of children playing in what was essentially dilute acid was apparently too much for several students to process. But, it was the deeper implication that truly unsettled them. If this was what humans considered safe for recreational activity, what did they consider dangerous? The answer came when Ambassador Kethvar, clearly struggling to maintain his composure, asked about Terra's more extreme regions. Well, Marcus said thoughtfully, there's the Antarctica, that's our southern ice cap. Temperatures drop to around -40 Celsius, winds can hit 200 kilometers per hour, and the air is thin enough that you need supplemental oxygen at altitude. Beautiful place, really. Great for building character. Building character? The words came out as barely a whisper. Military training, scientific research, extreme sports. My sister spent a summer there during her doctoral research. Said it was refreshing after the heat of the Sahara. The Sahara? Desert. Temperatures around 50 Celsius during the day, drops below freezing at night. Very little water, lots of sand, occasional sandstorms that can strip flesh from bone if you're caught in the open. She was studying extremophile bacteria. Each revelation seemed to compound the impossibility. These weren't descriptions of forbidden death zones that required massive technological intervention to survive. They were talking about places where humans went voluntarily, for education and recreation. Your people, the Gorathan delegate said slowly, actively seek out these environments? Sure, Marcus replied. Some of us, anyway. Mountain climbing, deep-sea exploration, volcano research, storm chasing. There's something about pushing boundaries that appeals to a lot of humans. Plus, someone needs to do the science. Storm chasing? The Nexary student's voice had risen to a pitch that suggested genuine panic. You pursue the weather phenomena that could destroy cities? Oh, you mean tornado chasing? Yeah, that's a thing. Meteorologists and hobbyists follow storm systems to gather data and footage. It's dangerous, sure, but the information helps with prediction and warning systems. Plus, Marcus grinned, it's kind of exciting. The concept of excitement derived from actively pursuing natural disasters was apparently beyond the processing capacity of several species represented in the gathering. But, it was becoming clear that this represented something fundamental about human psychology. They didn't just survive their hostile environment, they found it stimulating. The seismic activity reports, another student said, clearly trying to find some aspect of Terra that might be less terrifying than the others, show regular tectonic instability across multiple continents. Earthquakes, yeah. We get a lot of those. Most buildings in seismic zones are designed to handle quite a bit of shaking. You learn to keep emergency supplies handy and practice earthquake drills. Marcus paused. Though I guess some people do find them exciting too. There's a whole tourism industry around volcanic activity. Tourism? The word came out as a strangled gasp from multiple students simultaneously. Volcano tours, yeah. You can get pretty close to active lava flows if you're careful. Amazing to see the planet reshaping itself in real time. Of course, you need proper gear and guides who know what they're doing. Volcanic gases can kill you pretty quickly if you're not prepared. The image of humans treating active volcanoes as tourist destinations was apparently the breaking point for several students. One of the Zephyrians had begun vibrating at a frequency that suggested extreme distress. A Centauran had activated what appeared to be calming neural implants. But Marcus was just getting started. As the questions continued, the true scope of Terra's hostility began to emerge. Seasonal weather patterns that included months of sub-freezing temperatures across major population centers. Regular flooding that displaced millions but was treated as a predictable inconvenience. Wildlife that included not just megapredators but countless species of venomous, toxic, parasitic, or disease-carrying creatures that coexisted with human populations. Your medical databases, one of the more technically minded students said, list over 2,000 distinct pathogenic organisms native to your world. How do you maintain population health with such biological hazards? Immune systems, Marcus said simply. Plus vaccination programs, sanitation, medical treatment when needed. Most of the really dangerous stuff is pretty rare, and we've learned to deal with the common problems. Though I guess growing up with exposure to a few thousand potential diseases does keep your immune system pretty active. The casual mention of immune systems that functioned under constant assault from pathogens that could devastate other worlds was met with stunned silence. These weren't enhanced beings with technological augmentation, they were describing baseline biological capabilities that exceeded the enhanced maximums of most civilizations. Your childhood development, the Gorathan delegate asked with what might have been morbid curiosity, takes place in these same environments? Of course. Kids adapt faster than adults, usually. Playground equipment built to handle our gravity, organized sports that develop coordination and strength, exposure to environmental challenges that build resilience. Marcus smiled at what was apparently a pleasant memory. I remember camping trips where we'd hike through mountains, sleep in sub-zero temperatures, cook over open fires. Great way to learn practical skills. The idea of deliberately exposing developing young to lethal environmental conditions as a form of education and recreation was met with what could only be described as horror from most of the assembled students. But, Marcus continued, seemingly oblivious to their reactions. School sports were good training too. American football teaches pain tolerance and strategic thinking under pressure. Wrestling develops strength and body awareness. Swimming builds cardiovascular endurance and teaches water safety. Boxing, martial arts, endurance running, all good ways to develop physical and mental toughness. You teach your children combat sports, one of the more peaceful species asked in a voice barely above a whisper. Sure. Self-defense, physical fitness, discipline, respect for opponents. Plus, in an environment like Terra, knowing how to handle physical conflict can be a survival skill. The implications were becoming clear. This wasn't a civilization that had overcome their hostile environment through technology or avoidance, they had embraced it, incorporated it into their development, turned it into a competitive advantage. They had made allies of conditions that would destroy most species. Your literature and entertainment, a cultural specialist asked, clearly hoping to find some aspect of human civilization that might be less intimidating. Do they reflect these environmental influences? Marcus brightened considerably. Oh yeah, definitely. Survival stories are really popular, people stranded in the wilderness or dealing with natural disasters. Adventure fiction about exploring dangerous places. Horror stories about predators or hostile environments. Action movies with extreme physical challenges. You create fictional entertainment about surviving scenarios that would constitute genuine nightmares for most species? Well, when you put it like that. Marcus paused, considering. I guess we do find entertainment in fictional versions of things that could actually kill us. Never really thought about it that way. The cultural implications were staggering. A species that found recreation in simulated versions of experiences that most beings would classify as torture or horror. But, it explains something fundamental about human psychology. Their entire worldview was shaped by an environment that demanded constant readiness for extreme challenges. Your military capabilities, the Zentoran asked, his strategic mind clearly working through the implications, are they similarly influenced by your environmental conditions? Marcus's expression shifted slightly, taking on a quality that made several students unconsciously step further back. Terra has a pretty complex history of conflict. When you have a species that evolved to handle extreme physical challenges, competition for resources and territory tends to get intense. Intense? Wars, yeah. Humans fighting humans for territory, resources, ideology, survival. We've gotten pretty good at organized violence over the millennia. His tone carried no pride in this fact, but no shame either, just the matter-of-fact acceptance of historical reality. Though we've also gotten better at cooperation and diplomacy. Most of our current conflicts are economic or political rather than military. Most of your current conflicts? The question came from multiple students simultaneously. We still have some regional disputes and resource competition. Nothing like the global wars of previous centuries, but humans have trouble agreeing on everything. Usually, we work it out through negotiations or economic pressure these days. The casual mention of global wars as historical footnotes sent another wave of shock through the gathering. Conflicts that spanned entire planets were theoretical scenarios studied by military academies as examples of civilizational breakdown. For humans, they were apparently just phases they had grown out of. Your technological development, another student asked, was it accelerated by these challenges? Definitely. Necessity is the mother of invention, as we say. Hostile environment drives innovation pretty quickly. You develop better tools, better materials, better systems because failure means death. Marcus considered for a moment. Plus, when your species is naturally inclined toward risk-taking and problem-solving under pressure, technological advancement becomes a competitive advantage. Competitive advantage? Survival of the fittest, but applied to societies and technologies. The civilizations that developed better tools, better strategies, better adaptation survived and thrived. The ones that didn't, well, Terra has a lot of archaeological sites that tell those stories. The implications were becoming overwhelming. Not only had humanity survived a death world, they had thrived so thoroughly that their evolutionary pressure had been turned toward outcompeting each other. They had made their entire species into apex predators through technological and cultural evolution. When you were selected for this program, Ambassador Kethvar said slowly, clearly struggling to maintain diplomatic composure, what was the selection process like? Pretty standard academic and physical testing, Marcus replied. Good grades, high test scores, demonstrated problem-solving ability, physical fitness requirements, psychological evaluation, adaptability assessment. Physical fitness requirements? Basic human standard fitness. Cardiovascular endurance, strength, coordination, pain tolerance, stress response. He paused. I guess the standards might be a little different from other worlds. A little different. The phrase echoed in the sudden silence. The basic human standard fitness that Marcus described casually would represent the peak physical achievement for most species present. The psychological evaluation designed to assess readiness for interstellar education had apparently been passed by someone from a world that used natural disasters as recreational activities. Your adaptability assessment, one of the students asked with the kind of morbid fascination usually reserved for studying extinct civilizations, what did that involve? Problem solving under pressure, basically. Survival scenarios, resource management, crisis response, leadership potential. Marcus shrugged. Standard stuff, drop you in an unfamiliar environment with limited resources and see how you handle it. Standard stuff. The words hung in the air like a challenge to every assumption the assembled students had about what constituted normal educational preparation. They were beginning to realize that Marcus's casual confidence wasn't arrogance or naivety, it was the natural result of a lifetime spent adapting to challenges that would break most beings before they could even begin to understand them. I think, Ambassador Kethvar said slowly, we may need to revise some of our assumptions about the Sol system. Marcus nodded. Yeah, our information about the galaxy is probably pretty out of date too. We've been focused on local development for the most part. This is actually our first real diplomatic contact with the broader galactic community. The words first real diplomatic contact sent a chill through the gathering that had nothing to do with the Academy's climate control systems. If this was what humanity produced as a casual representative, a young student sent for academic exchange, what would their actual diplomatic corps be like? What would their military be like? What would their society be like when it turned its full attention toward interstellar relations? You said this is your first real contact, the Gorathan delegate rumbled. Does that mean you've had other contacts? Marcus's expression shifted slightly, taking on a quality that suggested he was choosing his words carefully. We've had some interactions with ships passing through our system. Usually just long-range scans and data exchange. A few instances where vessels needed emergency assistance or repairs. Emergency assistance? Search and rescue, medical aid, mechanical repairs. Standard humanitarian response: when someone's in trouble in the void between stars, you help if you can. The casual mention of humans providing aid to interstellar travelers painted a picture that was somehow even more unsettling than their descriptions of surviving planetary hostility. A species that could not only survive in impossible conditions but had developed the technology and inclination to rescue others from the vacuum of space. Your search and rescue capabilities, one of the more technically minded students asked, what do they involve? Pretty basic stuff. Fast response vessels, medical facilities, engineering capabilities, personnel trained for emergency operations in hostile environments. Marcus paused. I guess operating in the vacuum of space isn't much worse than some of Terra's natural environments, so we adapted our existing capabilities. The idea that humans found space operations comparable to their natural environment was a concept that challenged fundamental assumptions about the requirements for interstellar capability. Most species needed massive technological infrastructure and generations of preparation before they could safely operate beyond their atmospheric boundaries. Humans apparently treated it as a logical extension of their existing survival skills. Your space-based infrastructure, another student asked, how extensive is it? Growing pretty rapidly. Orbital platforms, lunar installations, asteroid mining operations, Mars colonies, research stations throughout the system. Marcus considered for a moment. We're working on interstellar capability, but that's still in development. This exchange program is actually part of our evaluation of galactic technological standards. The casual mention of Mars colonies on a planet that the galactic database listed as uninhabitable even by terraforming standards, was apparently the final straw for several students. Mars was classified as a death world in its own right, with atmospheric conditions that would kill most beings in minutes and environmental challenges that had defeated several attempted colonial efforts by advanced civilizations. You've successfully colonized Mars? The question came out as barely a whisper. Well, successfully might be overstating it. The colonies are self-sustaining but still pretty challenging environments. Dome cities, underground agriculture, recycled atmosphere systems, radiation shielding. Marcus smiled slightly. Though I guess after Terra, Mars is actually pretty manageable. Lower gravity, predictable weather, fewer predators. Fewer predators. The idea that humans found a radiation-bombarded wasteland preferable to their homeworld because it had fewer things trying to kill them was a concept that transcended understanding. They had made their own world so thoroughly habitable that genuine death worlds seemed pleasant by comparison. Your evaluation of galactic technological standards, Ambassador Kethvar managed, what have you concluded so far? Marcus looked around the gathering, his expression thoughtful. Impressive in some areas. Your energy systems are definitely more efficient than ours, and your transportation technology is remarkable. Some of your materials science is ahead of our current capabilities. He paused. But, honestly? A lot of your standard equipment wouldn't survive a week on Terra without major modifications. What do you mean? Durability, mainly. Most of the technology I've seen here is designed for stable environments with predictable conditions. It's elegant and efficient, but fragile. On Terra, everything needs to be built to handle extremes, temperature variations, mechanical stress, corrosive environments, electromagnetic interference, physical impact. Marcus shrugged. We tend to over-engineer everything because failure usually means death. The revelation that human technology was designed around the assumption that failure meant death provided another piece of the puzzle. While most civilizations developed technology to make life easier and more comfortable, humans had developed technology to prevent life from ending violently. Their entire technological philosophy was built around survival in conditions that would destroy most equipment and kill most beings. Your over-engineering standards, a technical specialist asked, what do they typically account for? Depends on the application. Basic consumer equipment needs to handle normal Terra environmental conditions, temperature ranges from -40 to +50 Celsius, humidity from desert dry to underwater, pressure variations, vibration, impact, corrosive atmosphere, electromagnetic interference. Marcus paused to think. Industrial and military equipment has much higher standards, obviously. The normal environmental conditions that Marcus described casually would represent extreme stress testing for most galactic technology. The idea that humans built equipment to survive such conditions as a baseline requirement was staggering, but it explained why their technology, while perhaps less elegant than galactic standards, was proving remarkably robust in testing. Your military equipment standards, the Zentoran asked with professional interest, what are their design parameters? Marcus's expression shifted again, taking on that quality that made students unconsciously step backward. Classified, obviously. But, let's just say that if your civilization can produce soldiers capable of operating in Terra's environment without technological assistance, your military equipment is probably built to survive things that would vaporize most civilian technology. The implications hung in the air like a sword. Human military capabilities, built around equipment designed to function in conditions that killed most beings, and soldiers who considered death worlds to be home environments. The mathematical projections were sobering: a military force that could operate effectively on worlds that most civilizations couldn't even visit would have capabilities that transcended conventional strategic thinking. You mentioned risk-taking as a human characteristic, one of the students said, clearly trying to understand the psychological aspects of what they were learning. How does that manifest in your society? Marcus brightened again. Oh, lots of ways. Extreme sports, exploration, research in dangerous fields, entrepreneurship, artistic expression, innovation in general. He paused. I guess when your environment teaches you that safety is always temporary and change is constant, you develop a comfort with uncertainty and risk that most people don't have. Extreme sports? Physical challenges for recreation. Mountain climbing, skydiving, deep-sea diving, whitewater rafting, motorcycle racing, combat sports. Marcus's smile suggested pleasant memories. Ways to test yourself against physical challenges in controlled environments. The concept of deliberately seeking physical danger for entertainment was apparently too alien for several students to process. But it provided another insight into human psychology. They had turned their environmental challenges into sources of personal development and recreation. What threatened other species, humans used to improve themselves. Your artistic expression, the cultural specialist asked, is it similarly influenced? Definitely. A lot of our art deals with themes of struggle, survival, conflict, growth through adversity. Music that expresses pain and triumph. Literature about overcoming challenges. Visual art that captures the beauty and terror of natural forces. Marcus considered. Though we also have plenty of art about love, beauty, peace, cooperation. It's just that the struggle themes tend to be pretty prominent. Beauty and terror of natural forces? Storms, earthquakes, volcanoes, ocean waves, forest fires, avalanches. Things that can kill you but are also genuinely beautiful to experience. Marcus paused. I guess appreciating dangerous beauty is another human trait. The idea of finding aesthetic pleasure in phenomena that could cause death was yet another piece of the puzzle. Humans didn't just survive their environment, they had learned to find it beautiful, meaningful, even spiritually significant. They had turned survival into an art form. Your spiritual or philosophical traditions, another student asked, do they reflect these environmental influences? Oh yeah, definitely. Most human religions and philosophies deal with themes of struggle, growth through adversity, finding meaning in suffering, the cycle of creation and destruction. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. When your world is constantly trying to kill you, you develop pretty complex ideas about the meaning and purpose of existence. Complex ideas about the meaning of existence develop through mortal struggle. The Gorathan delegate's voice carried what might have been awe. Your species has achieved philosophical sophistication through direct confrontation with existential threat. I guess so. Though we also have philosophies about peace, harmony, cooperation, love. Marcus shrugged. Humans are pretty diverse in their thinking. But, yeah, the struggle themes are definitely prominent. The conversation had gone on for over an hour, and the assembled students were beginning to look overwhelmed. They had started the day expecting to meet a promising student from a developing world. Instead, they had encountered a representative of something that challenged every assumption they held about the nature of civilization, intelligence, and survival. "I think," Ambassador Kethvar said slowly, "we may need to completely reassess our understanding of the Sol system and its inhabitants." Marcus nodded. "That makes sense. We're probably going to need to reassess our understanding of galactic civilization too. This is all pretty new to us. What are your people's intentions regarding galactic integration?" The question came from the Zentauran, and his tone suggested he was asking for reasons that went beyond casual curiosity. Marcus considered the question carefully. Peaceful contact, cultural exchange, trade opportunities, shared knowledge, mutual benefit. He paused. "We're not looking for conflict, but we're also not naive about the complexities of interstellar relations. Our history has taught us to hope for the best while preparing for various possibilities." Preparing for various possibilities? Diplomatic solutions are always preferable, but humans have learned that not everyone is interested in peaceful resolution. We believe in being ready to defend ourselves and our interests while working toward cooperative relationships. The measured nature of his response suggested careful thought and probably significant briefing. This wasn't just a student expressing personal opinions, he was representing a species that had thought carefully about their entry into galactic civilization and had developed clear strategic thinking about their position. "Your species' strategic thinking," the Zentauran continued, "how developed is it?" "Pretty sophisticated. When you grow up in an environment where poor planning kills you, you develop comprehensive approaches to problem solving, risk assessment, resource management, and contingency planning." Marcus smiled slightly. "Plus, our history of conflict has taught us a lot about strategy, tactics, logistics, and intelligence." Intelligence? Information gathering, analysis, pattern recognition, predictive modeling. Understanding your environment, your opposition, your resources, your options. Marcus paused. Essential skills for survival in any complex environment. The casual mention of intelligence capabilities as basic survival skills was yet another reminder that humans had developed competencies that most civilizations considered specialized military or scientific disciplines. They were a species where strategic thinking, intelligence analysis, and tactical planning were apparently as common as basic education. The gathering had attracted the attention of faculty members, who had been drawn by the unprecedented nature of the discussion. Several department heads were now listening with expressions that ranged from fascination to alarm. The revelation that the galactic community had completely missed the emergence of a death world civilization was apparently generating significant concern among the Academy leadership. "Your technological development trajectory," one of the faculty members asked, "what areas are you focusing on?" "Pretty broad spectrum. Energy systems, material science, transportation, communication, manufacturing, agriculture, medicine." Marcus paused. "Plus space technology, obviously, since we're working toward interstellar capability." "Your space technology development, how rapid is your progress?" Marcus looked thoughtful. "Hard to say, since we don't have much basis for comparison with galactic standards. But our timeline for achieving interstellar capability has been accelerating as we solve technical challenges and develop new approaches." "Accelerating how rapidly?" "Our current projections suggest we'll have practical interstellar transportation within the next few decades rather than the century or so we originally estimated." The revelation that humanity was decades rather than centuries away from independent interstellar capability sent a visible shock through the faculty members. Most civilizations required millennia to develop such capabilities, often with assistance from established galactic powers. Humanity was apparently achieving the same result through pure technological development driven by their survival-oriented approach to engineering. "Your industrial capabilities," another faculty member asked, "what is their scale?" "Planetary, with significant off-world components. Full-spectrum manufacturing, resource extraction, energy production, agriculture, infrastructure." Marcus considered. We've had to develop pretty comprehensive industrial capabilities because Terra's environment doesn't allow for much specialization. You need to be able to produce everything you need locally because supply chain disruption can be fatal. Everything you need locally? Basic survival requires food, shelter, clothing, tools, medicine, energy, transportation, communication, defense. Marcus shrugged. When your environment can kill your supply chains with weather or seismic activity, self-sufficiency becomes a survival requirement. The implications were staggering. While most galactic civilizations had developed through specialization and interdependence, humanity had developed through comprehensive self-sufficiency driven by environmental necessity. They weren't just capable of surviving on death worlds, they were capable of building industrial civilization on death worlds without external assistance. Your defense capabilities, one of the more military-oriented faculty members asked, are they similarly comprehensive? Marcus's expression shifted to that quality that made people step backward. Comprehensive, yes. But, I can't discuss specifics for obvious reasons. Of course. But, in general terms, are they designed around the same principles as your civilian technology? Built to survive and function in the most hostile environments imaginable while protecting people who have been shaped by those same environments. Marcus paused. Our approach to defense is pretty straightforward: hope for peace, prepare for war, be ready for anything. Be ready for anything? Humans have learned that the universe is full of things that want to kill you. Environmental threats, resource competition, territorial conflicts, ideological disputes, random disasters. Marcus's tone was matter of fact. Preparation for the worst-case scenario is basic survival thinking. The conversation was beginning to attract attention from beyond the Academy. Word was spreading through galactic communication networks that a previously unknown Death World civilization had emerged with capabilities that challenged fundamental assumptions about technological development and military potential. The implications for galactic politics were enormous. Your people's approach to galactic integration, Ambassador HFY said carefully, will it be guided by these same principles? Marcus nodded. Peaceful contact preferred, mutual benefit sought, defensive capabilities maintained. He paused. We're interested in friendship, trade, knowledge sharing, cultural exchange. But, we're also aware that not everyone in the galaxy may be interested in those things. And, if someone isn't interested in peaceful relations? Marcus's smile was subtle but unmistakable. Then, they'll discover that Terra taught us to handle threats effectively. The words hung in the air with the weight of absolute certainty. This wasn't bravado or posturing, it was the quiet confidence of a species that had survived the worst their universe could offer and had emerged stronger for it. The gathering began to disperse as students and faculty retreated to process what they had learned. The comfortable assumptions that had guided galactic civilization for millennia were crumbling in the face of evidence that evolution could produce something that transcended their understanding of what was possible. But, as Marcus Chen collected his materials and prepared for his first day of classes, his expression carried the same quiet confidence he had shown throughout the conversation. For him, this was just another new environment to adapt to, another challenge to overcome, another opportunity to grow. After all, how hard could it be compared to growing up on Terra? Addendum to Assessment Document GC 7749 Terra Classification, Urgent Strategic Review prepared by Ambassador HFY, Hegemony Council Distribution, Council Leadership, Military Command, Intelligence Services. The arrival of human representative Marcus Chen has necessitated a complete reassessment of our understanding of the Sol system and its inhabitants. Initial analysis suggests that we are not dealing with a primitive civilization seeking integration into galactic society, but, rather with the emergence of a spacefaring species whose capabilities may exceed our established parameters for such development. Immediate recommendations include upgrading the Sol system's classification status, initiating comprehensive diplomatic protocols, and beginning strategic assessments of the implications for regional stability. The humans' casual mention of preparing for various possibilities suggests a level of strategic thinking that should be taken seriously by our military planning committees. Further observation and analysis are urgently recommended. The galaxy may have acquired a new major power without realizing it. End document. The assessment would prove to be remarkably prescient. Within a generation, humanity's ships would be seen throughout the galaxy not as conquerors or destroyers, but as the beings you called when the impossible needed to be done, when the unsurvivable needed to be survived, when someone needed to go into the places where others could not. They had learned something on their death world that the rest of the galaxy had forgotten in their comfortable civilizations, that strength comes not from avoiding struggle, but from embracing it. That growth comes not from safety, but from challenge. That true power comes not from the ability to destroy others, but from the refusal to be destroyed by anything. Marcus Chen had spoken with pride when asked about his homeworld, and now the galaxy was beginning to understand why. Terra hadn't just produced survivors, it had forged something new entirely. Something that could look at the vast hostile universe and smile, because they had already faced worse and emerged victorious. The man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others. It was more than just a philosophy for humans, it was a way of life forged in the crucible of a world that demanded nothing less than constant evolution or death. And now that philosophy was coming to the stars.